The human face is perhaps the most scrutinized canvas in the entire history of modern civilization, a surface upon which society projects its shifting ideals, its deepest insecurities, and its insatiable desire for an elusive form of perfection. For generations, the images that captured our collective imagination were defined by a certain distance, a realization that the figures gracing the silver screen or the glossy covers of high-fashion magazines belonged to an ethereal realm separate from ordinary existence. We understood, on some instinctual level, that the cinematic lighting, the masterful application of cosmetics, and the careful staging of a photograph created an illusion, a beautiful myth that was meant to be admired from afar rather than replicated in daily life. However, as the world transitioned into a highly connected digital era, the boundaries that once separated the observer from the observed began to dissolve in ways that no one could have truly anticipated. The introduction of highly advanced photographic equipment, followed rapidly by sophisticated digital darkrooms, shifted the narrative from celebrating natural grace to manufacturing an entirely artificial standard of human anatomy. Today, we find ourselves completely immersed in a visual culture where every pixel is subject to manipulation, where the line between an authentic depiction of a human being and a hyper-stylized digital construction has become so thoroughly blurred that it is nearly impossible to distinguish reality from fabrication. This phenomenon has quietly reshaped our psychological landscape, altering how we perceive ourselves, how we judge the appearance of those around us, and what we ultimately expect when we look into a mirror. The relentless influx of flawless skin, impossibly narrow waistlines, and symmetrical features has established a baseline of beauty that does not exist in nature, yet it is presented to us every single day as though it were not only attainable but mandatory for social validation. As these immaculate portraits continue to flood our screens, a growing sense of unease has begun to take root beneath the surface of our hyper-connected society, prompting a quiet but profound questioning of the images we consume so passively. To truly understand how we arrived at this critical juncture, one must look closely at the subtle mechanisms that drive our modern fascination with visual perfection, and look toward the quiet rebellion that is just beginning to form among those who have spent their entire lives trapped inside the golden cage of public adoration. If you find these deep explorations into the changing landscape of media, culture, and human perception valuable, please consider subscribing to the channel to ensure you never miss the detailed investigations we bring to light each week. The pressure to conform to an unyielding standard of physical flawlessness is not a modern invention, but the tools used to enforce this standard have evolved with terrifying speed and precision over the last several decades. What once required an entire team of darkroom technicians, specialized airbrushing tools, and hours of painstaking physical labor can now be accomplished in a matter of seconds by anyone with a handheld device and a basic software application. This democratization of alteration has transformed what used to be an exclusive tool of the elite fashion industry into a ubiquitous feature of everyday communication, making the pursuit of an unblemished digital persona a standard part of the human experience. Celebrities who have traditionally served as the primary archetypes of societal beauty find themselves at the absolute epicenter of this cultural shift, acting simultaneously as the chief beneficiaries and the most prominent victims of this relentless drive for digital correction. Every public appearance, every casual stroll down a city street, and every studio portrait is subjected to an intense level of digital scrutiny, where even the slightest hint of a wrinkle, a blemish, or an asymmetrical curve is treated as an unacceptable defect that must be immediately, systematically erased from existence. This constant sanitization of the human form has created a strange paradox where the people celebrated as the most beautiful individuals on the planet are deemed too flawed to be shown as they actually are, requiring a complex layer of digital enhancement before they are allowed to be seen by the public eye. For the average viewer, the consequences of this widespread practice are both subtle and deeply pervasive, acting as a slow, continuous conditioning that gradually recalibrates our internal understanding of what a human being looks like. When every piece of media we consume features individuals with completely uniform, porcelain-like skin, perfectly sculpted jawlines, and proportions that defy the basic laws of biology, our brains begin to accept these anomalies as the default state of reality. The natural variations of the human body, the unique markers of age, expression, and individuality, are gradually cast aside, viewed not as characteristics of life but as imperfections that need to be hidden away or corrected at the earliest opportunity. This has led to a profound disconnect between the lived human experience and the digital realm we inhabit for hours each day, fostering an environment where natural features are increasingly met with dissatisfaction and anxiety. The illusion is so complete, so seamlessly integrated into the fabric of our daily content consumption, that we rarely stop to consider the immense infrastructure required to maintain it, or the psychological toll it exacts on both the audiences who watch and the icons who are forced to embody these impossible standards. Yet, beneath the glossy veneer of this digital empire, a critical conversation is beginning to emerge, driven by an increasing awareness that this endless cycle of modification may be doing fundamental damage to the collective human psyche. Questions are being raised about the true purpose of these altered images, asking whether we should continue to view them as a harmless extension of artistic expression, or if we need to confront them as a harmful distortion of reality that actively undermines our ability to appreciate authentic human beauty. As we prepare to look deeper into the specific individuals who are beginning to challenge this status quo, we must first recognize the sheer scale of the digital illusion that surrounds us. An illusion that has spent years convincing the world that to be human is to be fundamentally flawed. To fully grasp the magnitude of the crisis unfolding behind the polished glass of our digital screens, one must examine the specific mechanisms of the industry that turned human anatomy into an editable file format. The evolution from early cosmetic adjustments to total digital reconstruction did not happen overnight. It was a deliberate, highly lucrative progression fueled by the commercial necessity to sell an unachievable ideal. In the competitive arenas of entertainment, music, and high fashion, a celebrity's image is their most valuable asset, a corporate commodity managed by a vast network of publicists, agents, creative directors, and retouchers. Within this ecosystem, the actual physical person becomes secondary to the digital avatar constructed for public consumption. Specialized digital artists are routinely hired to spend hundreds of hours refining every single frame of a promotional campaign or editorial spread, using sophisticated software that can manipulate lighting gradients, alter bone structure, elongate limbs, and retexture skin down to the individual pore. The level of intervention is often so extreme that the final product retains only a passing resemblance to the living, breathing subject who stood in front of the camera lens. This systematic rewriting of human physical reality has long been defended within the upper echelons of the creative industries as a form of high art, an extension of the traditional relationship between a painter and their muse. Proponents of this view argue that fashion photography and celebrity portraiture were never intended to function as documentary journalism, but rather as escapist fantasy, a theater of glamour where the ordinary limitations of biology are intentionally suspended to evoke awe and aspiration. From this perspective, an edited photograph is no different from an oil painting by an old master, where lighting is stylized, proportions are idealized, and blemishes are omitted to achieve a grander aesthetic harmony. They contend that the public should view these images with a natural skepticism, understanding that they are engaging with a highly curated piece of commercial art rather than an authentic historical record. However, this artistic defense is increasingly clashing with the modern reality of how media is delivered and internalized by an audience that is constantly connected to the digital grid. The boundary between a stylized, high-fashion billboard and a raw, behind-the-scenes look into someone's life has been completely erased by the rise of social platforms, where edited professional campaigns sit directly alongside personal updates in a single, continuous stream of content. This structural shift has transformed the psychological impact of the edited image, tricking the human brain into processing a highly manipulated corporate asset with the same level of trust it would extend to a candid snapshot of a friend. The tension between the fabricated ideal and the reality of the human form has reached a breaking point, creating a volatile cultural atmosphere where the icons themselves are beginning to buckle under the weight of their own artificial perfection. Celebrities frequently describe a profound sense of dissociation when confronted with their heavily retouched images on billboards and magazine covers, experiencing a strange form of identity theft where their own faces and bodies are taken, altered beyond recognition, and presented back to the world as the official version of who they are. This phenomenon creates an unbearable double standard, as these public figures are expected to maintain the appearance of their digital avatars in real life, navigating red carpets, live television appearances, and paparazzi lenses where digital filters cannot instantly mask the natural textures of human skin or the inevitable effects of exhaustion and aging. The pressure to bridge the impossible gap between the physical self and the digital fiction has driven an unprecedented demand for invasive cosmetic procedures as individuals attempt to permanently sculpt their real-world features into the likeness of an edited photograph. This cyclical relationship between software and surgical intervention has created a closed loop of artificiality, where digital trends dictate physical alterations, which are then photographed and digitally enhanced even further, pushing the collective standard of beauty further away from anything resembling genetic reality. The psychological toll of this dynamic extends far beyond the immediate circle of fame, radiating outward into the wider population and fundamentally altering the development of self-esteem, body image, and identity among millions of media consumers. When young people are exposed to thousands of images every single day featuring human beings who possess no pores, no wrinkles, no asymmetrical lines, and no physical variations of any kind, their internal compass for what is normal becomes heavily distorted. The natural, healthy characteristics of human biology are miscategorized as flaws, leading to a pervasive sense of inadequacy that cannot be solved by conventional means because the standard of comparison itself is a digital lie. The industry's insistence on maintaining this facade has created a profound crisis of trust, prompting critics, researchers, and a growing faction of the public to demand a radical reassessment of how commercial imagery is produced and regulated. The debate is no longer confined to the realms of aesthetics or artistic expression. It has evolved into a serious conversation about public welfare, mental health, and the ethical responsibilities of the institutions that control the visual landscape of modern society. As the cracks in the glossy veneer of the entertainment world continue to widen, the tension is shifting from a passive acceptance of these digital distortions to an active confrontation with the systems that profit from them. The question that now faces the culture is whether we will continue to allow the systematic erasure of the human form for the sake of commercial fantasy, or if we are on the verge of a historic reclamation of authenticity, led by the very individuals who were chosen to anchor the illusion. This mounting cultural tension has sparked a significant shift in the entertainment landscape, as an increasing number of prominent figures choose to break their silence and dismantle the very illusions that elevated them to global stardom. For decades, the unwritten contract of celebrity culture required absolute complicity in the myth of perfection, with public figures quietly accepting the heavy retouching of their images as a necessary cost of doing business. Today, however, that contract is being aggressively rewritten by individuals who refuse to allow their authentic selves to be erased by digital software. High-profile actresses, musicians, and models are increasingly using their own massive media platforms to call out publications and marketing campaigns that alter their bodies without their consent. By sharing the unedited, raw photographs alongside the heavily modified final versions that appeared in magazines, these individuals are effectively pulling back the curtain on the industry's digital machinery, showing the world exactly how the illusion of perfection is manufactured. This public reclamation of reality is not merely a matter of personal vanity. It is a calculated act of consumer advocacy and psychological liberation aimed at breaking the cycle of body dysmorphia and low self-esteem that has plagued audiences for generations. Among the leaders of this modern movement are celebrated figures who have built their careers on a foundation of raw talent and authentic connection with their audiences. These individuals, having achieved the pinnacle of success within their respective fields, have recognized that their influence carries a profound social responsibility. Actresses who have won the highest accolades in cinema are now explicitly demanding that contracts for major fashion houses and cosmetic brands include clauses that strictly prohibit the digital alteration of their faces, insisting that their wrinkles, expression lines, and natural skin textures remain fully visible to the public. They argue that to erase the signs of aging or the markers of human emotion is to erase their identity, their history, and their depth as artists. Similarly, young pop icons and influential models, who are acutely aware of the intense pressure faced by their teenage fan bases, are making it a point to share unpolished, filter-free images of their daily lives, showing that behind the glamorous red carpet appearances lie the exact same physical realities, blemishes, and insecurities that every ordinary person experiences. The impact of this growing transparency is beginning to reverberate far beyond individual social media feeds, initiating a broader systemic shift within the creative industries themselves. Major fashion publications, historically known for pioneering the most extreme forms of digital manipulation, are being forced to adapt to a new cultural climate that values authenticity over artificiality. Some of the world's most influential magazines have launched historic issues featuring completely unretouched cover photos, celebrating the natural diversity of the human form and proving that glamour does not require the erasure of reality. Furthermore, this movement has caught the attention of legislative bodies in several countries, leading to new legal frameworks that require commercial advertisements to carry explicit warning labels if the human models featured in them have been digitally altered. This legislative intervention marks a historic recognition that hyper-stylized commercial imagery functions as a public health concern, one that requires transparency and regulation just like any other industry that impacts the collective well-being of society. As we look to the future, the ultimate outcome of this cultural battle remains unwritten, presenting a complex set of choices for both the creators of media and the audiences who consume it daily. It forces us to ask whether we are capable of recalibrating our collective aesthetic standards to appreciate the inherent beauty of imperfection, or if the human appetite for escapist fantasy and manufactured perfection is too deeply entrenched to be entirely undone. The answer likely lies in a nuanced compromise, an understanding that while photography will always retain an element of artistic expression, storytelling, and creative styling, it must not be used as a tool to dehumanize or to enforce an existential standard that alienates people from their own bodies. By viewing celebrity imagery with a healthy sense of skepticism, treating it more as a curated performance rather than an objective truth, society can begin to heal the deep psychological fractures caused by decades of digital distortion. The courageous stance taken by the modern pioneers of authenticity serves as a vital blueprint for this transition, offering a vision of a world where beauty is defined not by the absence of flaws, but by the courage to live openly and authentically within the skin we are born with. In this unfolding era of digital maturity, the true power no longer belongs to the soft